Back to the show. Sometimes the simplest stories can go a long way in bringing out the best in children.
Well, that is what Vikas Malkani aimed to do when he created the SoulKids program and co-authored the SoulKids book of self-confidence.
It stems from his belief that many issues adults face in life are a result of how their childhoods were conditioned. So the best way to help children develop positive behavioral skills is to start early.
We asked Vikas' co-author Sally Forrest and counsellor Elin Ong how this transformation can be achieved. Good morning, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, Vikas, let me start off by asking you now. There are many programs out there for kids, many different books. So why this? Why do you think this should stand out from the crowd?
Yes. Well, this actually came about because of an inspiration I had, and that happened when I was working with a lot of adults, and I found they have deep-rooted issues. And when I did research, I found out that these issues come from childhood beliefs. So I had this inspiration that if children are given correct, positive, confident beliefs when they are young, then that's what they grow up with, that's what they become adults with. And not only do they carry it into their adulthood, but they will teach it to their children.
And what kind of issues specifically?
Well, just knowing how good you are, understanding whether you're special or not. Believe it or not, most people live life thinking they're not special. And yet the fact is that every person on earth is an individual who's unique, who's special,
Right.
who's absolutely above normal. There is no normal in this world.
Okay, well, Sally, give us an example. What are some of the stories like in this book? And yeah, give us an example of how a story could help to build, such a self-confidence.
Okay. One of the stories in the book is something about a spider, and children learn a lot from nature, and they learn a lot from having fun. So all the stories are very fun stories. And there was a little girl called Erin who was only 6 from Singapore, and she came through SoulKids, and she learnt the story of the spider, and it teaches about confidence and patience and giving your best to any situation. And about 3 or 4 days later, I got a phone call from her mother, and Erin had been doing her homework one day, and she'd been sitting there and really struggling with the homework. And her mother said, "Oh, Erin, maybe try again tomorrow. Don't worry too much about the homework for today." And Erin said, "No, Mummy, I've got to be like the spider in SoulKids. I must never give up. I'm going to be very patient, and I want to exceed in what I'm doing." So the stories are fun, and they're memorable, and the children get very absorbed in them. And then they remember them, and they take them home, and they tell other people them.
So it's the idea of the narrative that sort of moves them, the idea that there's a progression in the story, and they keep that with them. I'm just curious, Lin Ong, do you find that, do you find that in your work with children, kids need this. They need to sort of have this fantasy world that they can use to make sense of their reality.
Yeah, very much, because kids think in terms very much of pictures. So if I ask you, what do you think of when you see a carrot? You imagine a carrot, so they think very much in terms of pictures. So when you give them stories, it allows them to associate very, very quickly. So that's very helpful for children.
I guess it's true. Everybody loves a good story, and you remember information a lot better through a story than from a lecture or So Vikas, again, when should kids be reading this book by themselves? Should their parents be reading it to them? Which way works better?
Well, Stephen, I say this book is for everybody who's from 6 years onwards till 96. So it's for children from 6 till 96, because I believe we never really grow up. There's a child inside all of us. And everybody loves a good story. Stories have been some of the oldest known methods of teaching, and they are the most powerful. So everybody should read this book. Children can read it by themselves, but at the same time, we encourage parents to sit and read to their children and ask them what they have learned. Now, at the back of the book, we have actually given the lessons for every story. So sometimes what happens, a parent reads the story, the child may say that there are 3 lessons to it, but then they turn over and they find, well, there's 5. So that makes the child think, and it makes the story go deeper into the mind.
And just maybe pick 1 or 2 stories. Besides self-confidence, what other skills do you teach?
Well, okay, the first story that comes to my mind is the story of the sunflower and the rose. And it's a beautiful story. It's in the book. Please read it, everybody, I suggest. But here's the lessons. The sunflower and the rose story teaches you that each and every one of us is unique and special. And we will be happy when we understand that we have strengths that should be brought out. We become unhappy when we always look at others and try to be like others. So in the story, the sunflower is trying to be like the rose, and that's why it's unhappy. But when it wants to be itself, that's when it becomes happy, and that's when it can grow to its highest potential. So that's a great quality, learning to look at yourself rather than looking at the external world all the time.
Right.
And this also means going against conditioning a little bit, because all of us are conditioned by the generation before. And we carry a lot of beliefs inside us. And that's the idea of SoulKids, to become very, very authentic, to understand who you are, to find out what your strengths are, and to take your passions forward.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, a lot of conditioning is done by the environment we're in. I mean, the role models we have, our parents, of course, play a large influence in that. So what happens if I'm a parent, and is there anything in here that I may not agree with, that I may feel, I don't really like this approach. I'm more conservative. I'm more, I'll use Asian in that sense, because we are more conservative. Elin, maybe you tell me from a counselor's point of view, would there be any parents who might be concerned with any of the topics raised here, and how can they approach it to sort of share the same values, but maybe from a slightly different approach?
Well, you see, in most of these stories in this book teach the children about self-confidence, and most families want really the best for their children. So if you think in terms of a child's development, and you have a blank slate, okay, and we exclude what is the hereditary parts because that's a given, then self-confidence is really like a building block. So you have that at the very foundation, and on top of that, if the parents teach behavioral skills and school skills as well, then when it comes to the crunch time, then you know that the foundation is strong. So if we want families that are resilient, for instance, we want healthy families, we want communities that are resilient, we want communities that are healthy, then we must start with the individuals. And there's no better time than to start when they're young, because that's the time when they're most impressionable, and they learn through stories, and also they learn at the quickest pace. So that's very important. So I do not think that any of those stories are going to be an issue. And also I think with SoulKids, they have a lot of interaction with the parents. So the parents themselves begin to value things that are taught in the book as well. So.
Sally, when you were coming up with some of the stories, did you feel like I know I'm writing for an Asian context, do I have to make some changes in the stories I'm going to come up with? Were there any adaptations that you made?
Well, we didn't need to, because it's for worldwide audience, so it wasn't just for the Asian audience, it was for worldwide. But one thing that we've realised through the SoulKids programme and the SoulKids book is when children come on the course and they go home and the parents see the change, then parents start phoning us and saying, how can we get involved? So we've now developed the SoulKids mentor training, and we've actually got parents whose children went through the course who are now training to take SoulKids forward, because it made such a difference in the life of their child, and therefore they want to become more involved as parents.
So you've seen that sort of effect happen.
Yeah.
I must mention a particular example that comes to my mind. Like, all the stories in the book are done by children themselves. And the cover that you see of the book is actually a painting by a beautiful young Japanese boy called Tatsuki. And he became part of SoulKids, went through the course, but he was so influenced and touched and transformed that he went home, talked to his parents. His mother signed on for a 4-month intensive program with us, which trains people to become mentors of SoulKids. And not only did the mother do that, when she changed so much, the father signed on. Now, can you believe this? He's in a senior management position, stationed here in Singapore, and now both the mother and the father are mentors for SoulKids.
So do you think
fantastic.
that let's say you want to expand your approach to sort of adults, I mean, how do you think that would be different?
Well, we teach them in a different manner, and we teach them a lot more than just stories and the games that are taught to SoulKids. And, you know, I personally believe that you have to become a mentor before you can transform a child, not just a teacher who has just learned something and passes it on, but a mentor who has learned something, has made it real in their own life, and then passes it on. Children learn by example. So it's not about what you talk to them, but it's about what you are. So what they see is what they become, not what they hear is what they learn.
We are, as parents, I think, that we can relate to.
Well, thank you for coming in this
Thank you
morning.
very much.
Thank you very much.
That was Vikas, Sally and Lin Ong talking about SoulKids, the book of self-confidence. So it might be a good read. I mean, give it a chance. I think, if anything at all, reading to your children, spending time with them is the best reward you can give your children.
And not just
Nothing
on
ever
like a
replaces
language
that.
level, but I mean, teaching them values, teaching them, you know how to love people, how to interact with people. That's the best thing. Most rewarding part being a parent. This is Primetime Morning on Channel News Asia.
Have yourself. I was almost going to say goodbye, but anyway, we're just off for a short break. There's still half an hour to come. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. We'll see you in a bit.
See you in a bit.